I have painted a lot of flowers in my day, but I can honestly tell you I am so super excited to share this one with you. I'm going to show you one of the coolest and most fun painting techniques that you can do with watercolors today, and that is painting with transparent layering. I hope you'll join me for this one today because this is bound to brighten your day and potentially become a technique that you will want to use more and more often. So let's just go ahead and jump right into this. Now, first off, you don't have to do this, but I do have a base sketch or drawing on my paper here to help me out today. You can absolutely do this in more of a free-handed way if you'd rather, but I personally find it less intimidating to start painting if I have a bit of an outline to follow. I also usually make fewer mistakes this way. So let me pull out this darker outline so you can see a little bit better what I've got going on here. Now, this is just a loose close-up look at these flowers, not any flower in particular either, but you can do this with a specific flower if you want to. I think lilies, poppies, daisies, tulips, or really any other flower would work fabulously with this technique. You can pause or zoom in on the screen to get a better look at my drawing if you'd like to try something similar to this, or if you'd like to skip the creating and drawing step altogether and just skip right to the fun of painting. I will have this outline available on my Etsy shop. And since I didn't take the time to show how to draw this like I do in other tutorials, I am going to put this on a 20% discounted price for 1 week. The main thing that you're going to want to keep in mind with creating an outline for this transparent type of technique is that you're going to want to draw it with follow-through lines. In other words, you're going to want to show every line or every edge of every petal, even if it's being overlapped by another. Think of it as like an X-ray image of the flower, I guess. Then once you've got your outline sketch ready, whether that's on a separate piece of sketch paper or my printed out Etsy outline, you'll want to very, very lightly trace that outline onto your watercolor paper using a pencil and a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house. Now, with this transparent technique, you really do want the pencil lines to be as light as possible while also still being able to see them. So something that I like to do to help with that is take a kneaded eraser, which is basically a moldable eraser that you can either dab at the lines with and take off some of that loose graphite, or something else that works good is to actually mold the eraser into sort of a snake shape, and then you can roll it along the paper back and forth. I'm realizing now that I probably shouldn't have actually done this to my demonstration paper because now it's going to be harder for you to see my lines as the viewer, so I do apologize for that. Hopefully I will still be able to show and explain what I'm doing as I go so that it is still understandable. Let me pull out my other supplies here now and we can get into painting. I've got my watercolor paints, some clean water, and a paper towel. I'm also going to tape my paper down today with some artist tape to help a little bit with some of the warping of the paper. And as a side note, any of the supplies you see me using today will be listed with links in the description of this video if you're interested. And lastly, we of course need some brushes. I'll be using my Craftamo brushes today, which seem to work for just about anything that I want to paint, which I love. I'll pull out 2 brushes today. I've got the larger number 10 round brush and the small number 3 round brush. Now, these brushes are currently out of stock, but a second batch is in the production stage right now and will hopefully be ready soon. So if you're interested at all, I have a link that you can click on in the description of this video that you can sign up with to be notified when they are available again. They sold out within 1 week last time, so it would be a good idea if you are at all interested. All right, now one of my favorite things about this painting, besides the awesome transparent technique that we're going to be using, we are going to be using a super limited color palette. Just a few colors is all that we need. First up, we're going to jump right in and paint the petals first. So we need some very light and very watered down pink, as well as a more concentrated and darker pink. I'll be using Quinacridone rose for this today, but you can use whatever color you want or have on hand. I think this would look really nice in a blue color or something. Now I'm going to designate my brushes to each color. The large brush is going to be for the light watery pink that we're going to be using as the main background wash of the petal. If you need to make it lighter than what's on the tray, after you've got the color in your bristles, you can even dip the tip of the brush into your water and then you can paint. This is just going to dilute and water it down even more. I'll go ahead and paint on the first petal shape here, just following the basic penciled outline shape. And I'm going to paint right over any overlapping petals or pencil marks that might be running through it. Then after I've got the light wash of color on here, and while it is still wet, I'll take my small number 3 round brush and dip it into the darker, more concentrated pink color. This small brush is now designated to this color, just like the larger one is to the light pink. In fact, I just hold the brush that I'm not using in my other hand without rinsing it out or anything to save some time and paint. This way I can easily and quickly switch back and forth. Now I'll use that darker color and basically do an outline tracing on the outside edge of this base wash color. The trick here is to paint right along the very edge of the wet paint so that it touches a little bit of the dry paper and at the same time also touches the wet wash of color. This is kind of a balancing act and probably the trickiest part of this technique, but it is a key point to making it work. The paint that slightly overlaps or touches the dry paper is what's going to make a nice, dark, crisp outer edge to the petal, helping it give an outline and emphasizing that transparent look. And then the portion of paint that touches and overlaps the wet light wash of color will sort of blend and spread into the inner part of the petal, creating a soft gradient of value and color. The idea and goal here is to have the edges of the petal stand out and be darker in value than the center of the petal. And then to finish off the look of the petal, you can take a small amount of color and paint some thin vein lines or streaks through the center part of the petal. This is just going to give the petal a little bit of texture and dimension, which will help it not look quite so plain. In fact, you can also add a little bit of extra color to a few spots along the edge of the petal and even at the bottom inner part of the petal that's closest to the center of the flower to create a look of shadow. This is kind of an extra step that you really don't have to do, especially if you're struggling with the technique, but it can add a lot of depth to the painting if you're able to put this in here. Something else that you'll notice me doing with this painting is that you'll see that I'm skipping petals and moving on to a petal that is not touching or overlapping a petal that I just painted. This technique is the most successful when you can let these petals dry completely before painting or overlapping them. Otherwise, instead of having a nice, crisp, dark edge to it, they will bleed and blend into each other, making one large petal shape rather than having the individual petal look. I probably should have mentioned this earlier too, but I'm only just now remembering this part. But the paper and paint supplies that you choose to use can also make a difference in having this technique work or not. I highly recommend using 100% cotton paper for this. I've tried this technique on other papers and sometimes it just doesn't work as good on other paper. It's almost like the cotton absorbs the color better and so it doesn't lift off as easily when you begin adding and overlapping the second layer of paint. I have also noticed that some brands of paint have more of a lifting off quality to them, and some tend to stain the paper a little more. One is not necessarily better than the other, but it does make a difference with what you're intending to do or paint. For example, this technique, you really don't want the color to be lifting off easily. It needs to be able to stay crisp and sharp when adding and overlapping layers of other wet colors. Otherwise, even if the paint is super dry, the colors are going to start to blur and blend together. On the other hand, if you're wanting to try, say, a bokeh technique, having colors that can lift off would be a better choice. Just to be clear on what I am using today, the paper is Arches brand 140 pound 100% cotton watercolor paper, and I am using M. Graham & Company watercolor tube paints. All right, now I have completed my first layer of petals. They look really good so far. Unfortunately, some of these petals are still a little damp, and I really want them to be nice and dry before painting over the tops of them. Now, you can just be patient and wait for this to dry, but I am going to speed up the process a little bit today by using my hair dryer and drying them off faster with this. This really is going to save a lot of time if I use this in between each layer. Then after I've got that first layer of paint nice and dry, I'll start painting on the second layer of color. I'll again paint these in the same way with the base layer of light pink first, and then adding on that outer, more concentrated dark edge of pink color. The biggest thing to remember here is to make sure to paint the whole petal, even the parts that overlap another petal. When your pencil lines are really light like this, it can be a little tricky to see them, so make sure that you're following the right lines. In fact, I think I actually messed up a couple of the petals later on because I followed the wrong line, but I just went ahead with it and sort of created a new petal shape out of it, and my mess ups worked out okay in the end. At this point also, my water is tainted enough that I really don't need a lot of the color on my palette anymore either for the light pink base wash of color. The other thing to work on and be careful with these overlapping layers is to try not to overwork the paint too hard or rub it a lot with your brush. Otherwise, even if you have paint that doesn't lift off easily, you can still potentially soften or diminish that hard edge that you have going on. I really love this transparent layering technique. It is something that is very unique and easy to do with watercolor paints. It does take a little bit of practice to get the hang of, but the practice is so worth it because it really is so much fun to do and it looks so neat when you're done. I hope you're finding my tips within this tutorial helpful so far. If you find you are enjoying my painting and teaching style, I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on more of my upcoming weekly tutorials. All right, the second layer of petals is now done. I'll again pull out my hair dryer and just speed up this drying process a little bit so that I can move on to the next layer. Okay, here we go with the third layer of petals, just like we've been doing. We're going to start overlapping these petals even more now, and please feel free to use the hair dryer whenever you feel like you need to. I think this is actually the petal that I messed up with and didn't quite follow the lines accurately with. So I just went ahead with what I was doing for now, and then I tried to touch up some of the lines later that I left out. But honestly, I'm the only one that probably would have noticed this mistake. So if you have a similar mishap, don't worry too much about it. It really isn't super noticeable. Okay, well done. These are all of the petals finished off. I just love the soft, flowy look that this gives. It really is a different and unique style. It was kind of fun to paint this in more of a close-up view too. That was kind of a fun change from what I normally do. So next up, we just need to add in the stems and the stamen of the flower, and we can call this painting done. I'll just take the number 3 round brush and some light watered down olive green paint and then paint along the stem lines. After that initial layer of color is down, and while it's still wet, then I'll take a little bit more concentrated olive green and add in just a few small touches of some darker color for a bit of shadow look. I'm not exactly painting this in the same transparent way that we just did with the petals, but you totally could if you wanted to. I have thrown in here one little leaf or blade of grass just to add a little something extra to this piece. It's really nothing too fancy, just one brush stroke of color, but you could add more of these if you wanted to. I chose not to because I didn't want to take away too much from the flowers themselves. All right, all that's left is the very center of the flower. So I actually did each flower a little different for this. Not sure which one I like better, but if you like one way better than another, you can paint both flowers with the same stamen rather than having them different like I'm doing. If I painted this again, I may try doing them both the same, but I wasn't sure which look I would like, so I just gave them a try, but that's a benefit you have from watching me try them first, I guess. Then you can pick which way you like the best. I wanted to have sort of a gradient of color on here, so I've pulled out a little bit of Gamboge and a darker, more shadowy red color, which is a mixture of alizarin crimson and some of this olive green. I'll start by painting the stamen line with just water first to help the colors flow and blend together better. Then I'll take some of the Gamboge paint and put that on the top round portion of the stamen, moving it down just a little ways. Then I'll take some of that mixed up shadow red color and continue that on down the line, making it the darkest at the bottom. In fact, maybe I'll even try throwing a little bit of this olive green at the very base as well. To add a little bit of shadow and make this top part stand out just a little bit better, I may even add just a touch of some of the dark red or even green along one side or bottom area of this too. Just whatever you feel like looks good here. I'll paint this second stamen sort of the same. The thing that I did a little different and wanted to try with this one though is have the stamen line move all the way down and connect right to the stem line. The idea of this was just to keep that same transparent or see-through look going, where the other flower has sort of a disconnect between the stamen and the stem. I'm not sure which way I like better, but luckily you can make that choice on your own painting. That is the beauty of these tutorials. I'm just the guide here, but you can do or change up anything that you want to in your own artwork. Well, I guess that's it for today. This was super fun to do. I really enjoyed creating this piece. In fact, it's probably one of my favorite paintings that I've done over the last few months, so I hope you'll give it a try sometime. The fun thing is, now that you know the basic transparent technique, you can really apply it to just about any flower that you want to paint. I hope you had some fun today and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.